Kenta Maeda and Lance Landon, Carlos Carrasco and Zach Greinke. Great. Maybe some Sandy Alcantara in there. Just across the first 10 rounds, you got to get 4 of those guys. Set yourself up for that opportunity. As far as auctions go, I feel kind of similarly. Maybe I would spend a little bit more on another starter that I like. I might act because I recognize that the strategy I have for snake drafts doesn't really reflect normally because the dollar value can be kind of equal farther into the pitching pool than I would like. So I might favor one guy in the top 10 that I would pay a little bit more for, and then go for 3 more before inside the top 40 or so. But the same premise is there on both ends. 4 guys that you really trust, and then open yourself for the opportunity to add during the season.
All right, interesting. We haven't really heard that kind of thing on our show so far this year. Ruvain, I'll ask you this. We've noticed from talking with each other that there are some players that maybe we'll prefer more in a snake draft setting, or at least we will find ourselves rostering more, and maybe there's some players that we'll find rostering more in an auction. Who are some of those players for you?
Well, some of those players, those are like the 1A players. You mentioned a couple of them already. You mentioned Carlos Carrasco. If you want strikeouts, you can go with either a Lucas Giolito, who's not as high up. You can go with a lot of these mid-range guys. In a draft, it depends where you are. It depends how the draft is going. Depends on the runs. But in auction, you can actually pick and choose. You can pick who you want. That's the beauty of an auction. You can spend however much you want on each pitcher, but you have to use the money smartly. Otherwise, you're going to lose them. You're going to lose value. The main thing is value. In my opinion, value. It doesn't matter who you're going to get. If they fit your value and they fit your team, then they're worthwhile.
Yeah, I'm going to find myself drafting not much of Max Scherzer in a snake draft, but I might actually go for him in an auction. I think that people are, with Scherzer, it's funny, you look at all the projections and they look like he's still awesome, top 8, top 9 pitcher, but people don't want to pick him. He's going to fall off, he won't pitch, and they're sort of fading him just by the whim of their seat, but somebody will pick him up at a certain point in a draft. For an auction, I feel like they're going to fade him even more. Why spend $30 on Max Scherzer? Get somebody else, and you'll find that there's so many other pitchers that will be pushed up more that Max Scherzer will be maybe the 10th or 11th best pitcher in not best, but most money spent on in an auction, and that might be a buying opportunity that maybe I'll go for. Any pitchers that for you, Nick, that you might be less or more, whether you're in a draft or auction?
That's a really good point with Scherzer, by the way. I don't think he gets enough respect. He deserves more respect. I could see on the other side of it, like I find myself in snake drafts getting Kenta Maeda and Zach Gallen a bit later, 4th, 5th rounds, as opposed to the 3rd round swing where all those guys go in the top 10. And kind of Lance Landon and Carrasco and stuff, I can see myself getting them as they fall, but then auctions, they get kind of grouped together with the other ones. Blake Snell is a good example. Blake Snell is costing more than his snake draft relative price, right? Like a 2-round difference in a snake draft is way different than a couple dollars relative in the auction.
Right.
So that's kind of where I would see the biggest gap. And also, I think in snake drafts, I find myself in the last couple rounds just getting my fun guys more often. And I feel like Drew Smiley, for example, I would not be able to get him for $1. I'll have to spend like $5-6 to get Drew Smiley. But then in a snake draft, I can just get him in the 20th round, and I feel like that's a lot easier to get. So
those are great points. And I'll just to touch on a little bit of what you said there to expand. In a draft, you're right. If the supposed value or the deemed draft capital that you'd have to pay at each point in the draft goes down a little bit more significantly than the drop that the players are worth in terms of auction dollars. So if you take a look at, let's say, ATC auction dollars that are generated, there's going to be a large pack of pitchers somewhere that vary between $2 and $3, right? And you can find more of a market efficiency there where just because there's so many pitchers valued the same, somebody is going to drop more. So I would expect for those clumps where there's a lot of people in there, you're going to get pitchers more in that range, whereas in a draft, you probably won't get them because they're either going to be overvalued from your standpoint, or they're just not going to be available because people have to take the certain quantity. So that's a good point, and I think you should be aware of that the clumps of value are a big distinguisher between auctions and drafts in terms of who you're going to get and what your plan is. You cannot create the same plan for a draft than an auction. People make this mistake all the time, that when you're planning, you can't just say, I like this pitcher, I like this pitcher. Some pitchers are a bigger value in auction, and some are a bigger value in drafts, and you have to plan each one individually against the market for that format, right? It's totally different. You can't just make one plan. Plan everything. Every league has to be individually, but draft and auction has more differences than you think. Yeah. All right. Now, for the part of the show, we talk about the ATC player discussion. That's where we take a couple of players who, on the surface, ATC seems like is a bargain as compared to the market, and we talk about whether we think that, right? Well, you don't love projections, but let's see what ATC says something, and I might disagree also, right? We don't take it as gospel, but ATC helps us bubble up some potential guys. So we're interested in what you're going to say about it, and we'll go around the room. Our first pitcher to talk about is Sean Manaea. Sean Manaea, who, his best part of his game is his walk rate. His walk rate is super low at about 4%. Strikeout rate, not as good. He's got about a 20% strikeout rate, which is meh. But what I think you're getting out of Sean Manaea are some good ratios, or at least a nice, a very high floor of what you're going to get. You're not going to get disasters. He has a 50% ground ball rate approximately. That's going to tell you that he's not going to be prone to these blow-up games. Looking at ATC's interprojection metrics, Sean Manaea has a 2.5 standard deviation. That's really low. So projections are really tight on him, and projections are saying he's about a $9 player in a 15-team auction, where he's going for about $5. Now, I usually don't mention this on the show, but when I give auction dollar amounts, I can give amounts for any different kind of format, but just to standardize, I'm going to be talking more NFBC style, 15-team, 5x5. If you play in the 10-team, it's going to vary different, but just so that I have a standard thing, I throw out numbers like that. Anyways, Nick, what are your thoughts about Sean Manaea? Are you interested, and where am I wrong?
I don't really care for Sean Manaea this year. I mean, and a 12-teamer, right? I understand 15-teamer. I think there's a little bit more value. I think he's very borderline of what I call a Toby. Which, if you don't know a Toby, he's someone who you work with who gets the job done, but you don't really like him. And that's obviously Toby from The Office. And Sean Manaea is going to be teetering with your waiver wire, I think, a lot in a 12-teamer because, I mean, he doesn't strike out guys. 20% rate last year and you're 17% 2018. He had that really weird blip when he came back for September in 2019, but that was not stable. We all knew that. It's about 20 innings or so. And Manaea, like, when you look at him as a pitcher, like, how does he do things? He's a sidewinder who has always had injury problems. He doesn't throw particularly hard, and he isn't a command-focused guy. He just kind of, I call him a shover. Like, he like shoves the ball into the zone. It's not this, normally guys are just there. They're whipping it in there. He just kind of gets it there. And it doesn't have this feel of command intact that would suggest that he should have this really suppressed hard contact rates or that he should be missing a ton of bats. He doesn't really have those major secondary pitches. The slider / curveball breakers aren't really special. Changeup has its moments. So with Sean Manaea, it's just kind of borderline as a 12-teamer. And the problem is, let's say he's the fourth starter. I don't know if that's what it's going to be. It doesn't really matter. The first 3 series that the Athletics have are a 4-game set against Houston, 3 against the Dodgers, and then 3 against Houston again. So Manaea could easily get the Houston Astros twice to start the year. If I'm in a 12-teamer, I'm not starting Manaea for either of those 2 games. And so if I'm drafting him in a 12-teamer, I'm going to sit on my hands with Sean Manaea for 2 weeks for a guy whose ceiling is nothing great, and I can likely find someone to replace him on the waiver wire if I wanted to chase a 3.7 ERA at a 120 WHIP. I with a sub 20% strikeout rate. Like, I don't see the appeal of me drafting Sean Manaea. So yeah, I'm not too interested.
That's a good point, and I think for him the league size matters, right?
Oh,
I think
yes.
I think very much. Certainly in a 12 team league, we're talking somebody who might ride the waiver wire, and especially you made a good point about the matchups are pretty bad early on. But for me, look at his track record. Look at his roto values over the past couple years: $5, $2, $9, $5. Last year, $0. We're talking about somebody who has earned value, and that's because his ratios are solid: 3.86, 3.6, 1.21 ERA. Last year he had a 4.5, but he was a little bit unlucky. His FIP was 3.7. So I kind of like 15-team league, a guy that you're getting who's going in the 17th round to pad some of your ERA. To me, that's a unique profile in the 17th round. I'm interested because I think he's going to probably drop. He's probably worth a few rounds more just looking at his expected production.
I mean, you don't know if he's going to pad your ERA, and not to mention he has an injury history that isn't favorable. I mean, yeah,
but
he's
cheap enough but he's still cheap enough to drop. He's in the 17th round, so I think he's worth more in a 15-team league. And if you drop him, you drop him.
Right. Yeah, in a 15-team league, I understand the point of saying, hey, that potential ERA plays up better. I think from 2018 when Manaea had a 3.59 ERA, his expected ERA was 4.69. We didn't quite believe it. It only came with a 16.5% strikeout rate as well.
Yeah, it's
it
pretty
seemed
bad.
All
right?
kind of just, and a small sample of last year didn't really showcase anything different.
Yeah.
And 2019 we all knew was an anomaly. So it's just a lot of shrugs. And I will say this: if I'm drafting a guy, even if it's the 17th round, I have a philosophy of not drafting guys for the most part. I mean, this is not. There are no catch-alls here. But in general, I like drafting guys thinking that they can be more than what I'm drafting them at, right? And so you're saying 17th round, 15th team Rashawn Manaea. I don't know if he can be much more than that. So I think there are other options out there that will make you will make up your mind earlier in the season, and that will allow you to find something else that could be better if it doesn't work out. But if it does work out, then it's a better value at the 17th round than what Manaea would provide.
All right, got it. He is the opposite of a Chris Archer type guy, which is the kind of guy that I stay away from. So interesting thought there. How about you, Ruvain? Anything to add to the conversation?
Yes, actually. He's going to be a little bit farther away from that shoulder surgery. So it's going to be very interesting to see if his velocity goes up a little bit in the spring, and that may be something to watch for.
It's been down the last couple of years.
It's been down, and now he has a normal, quote-unquote, normal offseason. His BABIP last year was 30 points higher than his career, which means he was a little bit unlucky, and now maybe his defense gets a little bit better. I mean, they now have Andrews at short instead of Marcus Semien. It's a slight increase because he is a ground ball pitcher, so he may get a little bit more lucky. He may have better defense, especially because he's a ground ball pitcher. So, I mean, with that better defense, you may have some upside. And plus, one thing in his favor, his hard hit rate was down last year, which is something good. And if he can get his velocity up, that may be someone you may be willing to pick in the 17th or 18th round.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, he's not a guy that screams, oh my God, but, for the price, I think it's very interesting. And of course, as I say with everybody, it depends on the composition of your team. If you have a nice lead in strikeouts per pitcher slot, he's a guy that would fit in. If you have the ratios and you're a bit down on the strikeouts, he would not fit your roster. So it's also context heavy there. All right, it's now...
actually,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
I'm very curious. I wish I had it in front of me. Where is Mike Minor going relative to Sean Manaea?
I will pull that up quickly on my
you're the
dashboard
best, Ariel.
There. I don't. Mike Minor is going the 21st round, so he's going a couple rounds later.
So that's a very interesting comparison because I think Minor's going to get more innings than Manaea is. I think Manaea, the Minor has a favorable matchup at least to start the year where we can see where he's at. He made improvements to his breaking stuff last year. I mean, essentially, I see them kind of in the same mold of this. I don't really expect them to have 25% strikeout rates. I don't, but I also think they can help in ERA and WHIP to some degree. And in my head, I'm like, well, I think Miners showcased that he can have a 200 strikeout season as recent as 2 years ago, in 2019 when he told the guy to drop the ball in foul territory. There's